Well, Charles, thanks so much for jumping on the show today. I want to start with your time with the Los Angeles Clippers. You spent 8 years with them, and for those that aren't familiar, that's the NBA team, one of the two NBA teams in Los Angeles. You served as their chief technology officer there. So the first thing, before we get maybe to the technological side, what's it like to work for an NBA team?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a loaded question because not only was I working for NBA team, one of the most premier LA teams, I'll have to
Yes.
say, but I also had I had the pleasure of working with Steve Ballmer himself, one of the more innovative owners, and being able to take a lot of those passionate things that Steve would make sure the fan experience, the players themselves, everybody really felt at home through technology. It was an extraordinary experience. Very stressful. I still remember going to every single home game, praying that the different lines would be working, the printers at the score box. But by the end, once we had a routine and everything was really jiving, it was a blast. You got to be part of the actual team.
Yeah, and I'm curious because people that see the sports, they probably assume they got coaches, players, some behind the scenes. Like how many? I don't know if you know the answer to this. Like how large is the staff for like the NBA team? Like how many employees do they have?
That is one of the biggest secrets I don't think most folks know. These organizations are worth billions of dollars. I think Clippers right now is at 3 or 3.5, even more with the new stadium. But when I started, there was 300 employees. So it's this dichotomy of a massive brand that has extraordinary world relevance and brand recognition, but run like a mom and pop. But unlike a mom and pop, you have some of the most innovative, you have some of the most passionate, you have people where this was their dream to work at. And so you get to have this very adaptability, agile type of organization, but you can't expect to be at the Disneys or the GEs where as a CTO you have 100 people, 200 people, 300 people supporting each of these different roles. You have to be innovative. You have to find ways
Yeah,
to be scrappy and really work closely with the other departments.
yeah. So for those not familiar, what does a CTO do exactly? What does that mean?
Great question. And specifically in sports or the general?
Well, let's start with sports, and then we'll kind of go from there. Yeah.
Yeah, so historically, you have two roles that are in the IT leadership or the technology leadership. You have your CIO, Chief Information Officer, that is a lot more focused on IT, the systems, making sure phones are working, Wi-Fi's up, networks running, all of those traditional supporting roles that a organization needs. Where your CTO, your Chief Technology Officer, is a lot more forward facing. How do they think? What's the innovation roadmap that we need? What are our fans going to want to see, experience, and really hold on to 1 to 5 years from now? And so the CTOs that are in the league today are very much your data heavy. They're partnering very closely with your marketing team to implement MarTech, AdTech. They're very close with your partnership team to be providing vision to these brands that want to engage but don't necessarily know how to do that in a more modern and next generational technology type of way. And so that's where your CTO is pushing the needle while your CIOs are going to be making sure that Wi-Fi that went down every week is not even something you think about anymore.
And I'm curious too. I mean, there's a uniqueness to like an NBA team, billions of dollars, but also, it's not a Disney or something like that. Did you have any collaboration with, there's about 30 teams. Any of the other teams, you guys work together at all? Is it all kind of like everyone kind of goes for it themselves? What's that like?
Yeah, I have a great story about that. So every year when I first joined, there was this conference called the SEAT conference. So it was the Sports, Entertainment, and Technology Conference, led by an extraordinarily great group of either ex-CIO CTOs or current CIO CTOs in this space, and it brought together all the leagues. Usually lined it up alongside the league meetings. Every year, every league will take their constituent teams, come together, talk about what's to come, what are they working on, and what interesting projects each of them have seen. As COVID hit, all that went away. So the collaboration, the camaraderie, the commiseration, as I like to say in technology, was no longer there. And the fateful Wednesday after COVID hit, come Thursday, I was getting 4 to 5 calls a day from the different colleagues around around NBA asking me, what are you guys doing for VPN? How did you guys get everybody remote? Are you guys using Office 365? Are you using X, Y, and Z to be able to enable the workers from home? And it got to the point where I realized there's so many people that would love to just get on a forum, get onto a conversation. So I started up a weekly call and started at 12 or so NBA teams, very quickly rose to all 30. Then they brought in their NHL counterparts. Then NBA or NFL came by, MLB, PGA, NASCAR, and very quickly, with I think maybe 2 months, we had 180 CIOs and CTOs attending every single week for commiseration of, man, this is really hard for all of us, for vendor understanding or vendor negotiation, and then tip of the spear innovation. What is somebody, let's say, reverse or cashless ATMs was a very big idea in the pandemic of everybody's going to have it. We're not going to be using credit cards anymore, and the implications against that. Having a few of those teams that were part of that forum every week was super helpful. And unlike the sports side of it, where you have your analytics team, you have your GMs, your scouts, they are extraordinarily secretive. Their special sauce cannot get out. But on the business side, the technology, I was blown away by how often you could pick up a call to somebody, a CIO for, like Bill Schlaus, one of the CIOs for the San Francisco Giants, and he would spend an hour giving you advice, giving you mentorship, and giving you 5 other people that could also help and help you out with whatever problem you're going through, or get you the better pricing that you need to take to your executive. So it's extremely collaborative in hindsight, and I love that about it.
Yeah. I'm curious too. You mentioned, obviously the technology side, but also like game day, all the things, the Wi-Fi, printers. What's it like, because a lot of these professional teams share stadiums. Now, the Clippers, just opened their own stadium for the first time.
Yeah.
But before that, they're sharing it with the Lakers, with the Los Angeles Kings. I don't know. I'm sure there's other ones I'm missing. Is it hard? Is there tension? Do you work together? How is it like running a building with other professional teams, with other staffs, got their own direction of things they want to do?
Well, I would say it's going to depend on your relationship with the venue itself. For example, AEG owns Staples, now known as Crypto Arena. It's still Staples in my heart, but owns Staples, but the Kings don't. And so the Kings are a tenant of Staples, and the Clippers were a tenant of Staples. So even at that point, we both were always shifting, putting up lines, pulling down lines. Nothing can be perfect. So you have to really have that perfectly standardized way of dropping things, bringing them up, dropping things, bringing them up, and you collaborate with your fellow team. There's 2. I think we had 2 folks for my original team that actually ended up going to the Lakers, and it was great because there's always that camaraderie of if they dropped one of the H-stand lines and they need another 150-foot cord, we're happy to give it to them. Or if there's issues with their connections to the NBA, they don't have as much broadcast experience, so I would jump over there and help them out. But from other locations where the team also owns the venue, and then there's a secondary, it has the venue has a duty to have to provide. Like they're the landlord, they have to provide the services, but because of how finicky superstitious, you tell me what the best word for it is. A lot of teams always want to be dropping their own cable, dropping their own lines, putting their own gear in there since it's their standardized stack. Yeah. But there's always collaboration there if you're nice, if you're willing to play with the other side.
Yeah. I'm curious too. I'm assuming a job like yours, a lot of these people that probably work for these professional teams, if you're not actually on the team, whether they're winning or losing, like your job is pretty the same. But how does that affect? Like, how does the success of the team on the court, does it affect the morale of the employees, or it's like our job, so it is what it is regardless?
Winning is life or death. And not to be so hyperbolous, but one of the jokes I like to bring up is if you lost last night, every conference call, every meeting, every review, every single interaction that you'll have really is a hard interaction with somebody. And what makes it even worse is as you're interacting with folks outside of the organization, they give, oh, it's not a big deal. You guys are doing great. Everything, but they're not going through that mud, that frustration that is shared by all 300 people underneath one roof. On the flip side, if you're winning, life is great. It's easier to get budget pushed through. It's easier to get your Dave Martin, which was one, or sorry, Dave Wall, which was one of our GMs when I first started there. He was part of the Celtics team who came over with Doc, and he had a really good way of explaining it. This season after the Celtics won their championship, they had probably 20 games that they won the next year they shouldn't have won. But you got that swagger. You got that just nothing can stop me type of attitude. And it definitely carries over not only to the sports, but definitely to those who are supporting the sports organizations. Because most of them they're very passionate about sports. They love it. Yeah. This is what they want to be doing.
Yeah, that's good. Now, when you're at the Clippers, I'm curious if you could maybe talk through a couple of the tech advancements or the things that you guys did that you implemented. Like, what are some things that maybe you were most excited about?
Oh, so many. One of the first ones that is the more on the IT side was we were the first North American professional sports team that was completely cloud. So no on-premise infrastructure required for operations. We still had the NBA required infrastructure for the HSAN, which is the main routing room to take the feeds from downtown to Secaucus. But outside of that, we were fully on Office 365. We were using Teams for all of our communication. We were using OneDrive, SharePoint for all file shares. So we had almost eliminated every single piece of reliance on-prem. And that came from both, yes, it's Steve. Well, one of my favorite stories, first time I ever met Steve was at the airport, where I don't think he had any idea who I was, but I was coming in with the president and the CFO to say this. We want to bring him in as our new head of technology, and he was so passionate. The first couple seconds out of his mouth, I was like, "Oh, this is going to be a great conversation." I'd done an audit of all of the things that needed to be fixed, and this, that, and the other. And one of the big ones was backup. And Steve said something that I never thought I would never hear from a tech guy, which was, there's all these legacy systems. We need to back them all up and have them on continuous backup, because if anything blows up, we don't even know what we have. And his point was, while I fully believe in backup, and I think that is part of the three-legged stool to make sure that you are always resilient, you have DR. If I give you this backup that you're asking for, I'm basically giving you a free pass to not really have to do anything for the next 2 or 3 years. So what I'd rather is push harder. You tell me what you need to get everything off premise. So backup isn't your highest priority. Your highest priority is stability, is transparency. And when something breaks, you can't tell me 18 different things that might have happened, and then it breaks again a week later, and 18 more things might have happened, and you don't really know. And so that was a very interesting learning lesson I had from him, which was pushing innovation, pushing the ball forward for the future. As long as you can minimize risk, don't just hold on to the old because you don't really know what it is. You don't necessarily know what it could break or whatnot.
That's good. Now, on the flip side, I'm wondering if there was anything that you were really excited about or thought was going to be great and then didn't work out or totally flopped.
That's a good question. I was very impressed with Steve's the Clippers' original push towards OTT. So OTT is over the top. That's being able to stream games if you're a fan. Historically, the last big TV deals were all around. They baked OTT into the Fox Sports, now Bally's and it these systems were absolutely terrible. No one actually ended up wanting to watch them. There was a lot of hubbub of it's going to ruin the entire industry. But I was so impressed with Steve taking money off the table to be able to own his own OTT rights during the deal, so that he could create Clippers Vision, so that he could create a relationship with Second Spectrum for the fan. He could create a fan engagement, and I was drinking the Kool-Aid at the beginning. Like, once you put this in front of the once you put this in front of the fans, they will absolutely love it. And that was probably 3 or 4 years too early. Now we're seeing these OTT and owning the streaming rights as being, that's what the proliferation of women's sports is blowing up. That's why we're seeing so much crossover between not just the U.S. and the Premier Leagues and the La Ligas, but the Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney's Wrexham, where even their first year they couldn't stream because they were locked into TV rights. Disney, the Disney show hits very quickly. They're one of the highest viewed games across the pond that we've ever had. So
it's crazy. All the streaming sports is a mess right now. I mean, those of us that know, you mentioned Bally, now FanDuel. There's all these lawsuits and bankruptcies of, like, people can't even watch their own local games. Like they'll even pay for the service and it doesn't even work. And so it's like, it's been a mess. And so, I could see how that'd be a big thing.
And I would definitely attribute that mess to none of those started from scratch. FanDuel started from scratch a lot more. They were a tech company that just did a lot within the gaming space. But Fox Sports was never they're never a technology company. They're never a dev company. And so those organizations are very hard to innovate. And we see it a lot of the times. It's why BCG Digital Ventures did so well of, let's go to the Coca-Colas or the Nikes or the Procter & Gamble. And instead of trying to put a incubation or an accelerator, a corporate accelerator incubator internal, where it has all the red tape and everybody has ego, let's extract them from it, put them in a very innovative space like we have down here in Manhattan Beach, and then do really, really interesting things, because you get to start from the ground up. That's where YouTube is so lucky. That's where Twitch is, or Amazon is so lucky with their they're acquiring those rights, because they got to build from the ground up.
Yeah, that's good. Now, we talked about the streaming, the rights, the broadcasting, the sports. So maybe that's one of them. But I'm curious how you manage the risks or take risks and try new things, while also not trying to do something that could potentially damage or embarrass a big brand, like a professional sports team. So was that a tension for you guys? How do you manage that?
So it's a great question. There's been so many different issues where somebody doesn't realize the brand is bigger than them, and while it is connected, it is not their brand. And so you'll see issues with social media, or you'll see issues with somebody recording a video. The biggest thing is similar to what you hear with NFL, protect the shield. I don't want to ever tell anybody you have to blindly protect something that you don't believe in, but also don't utilize that asset as if it's your asset. What you should always be doing is building your own personal brand as an empowerment asset for that. But you shouldn't be going out and just talking crap on it, or doing something that is not that is not generous, because this is a place that gave you an extraordinarily strong opportunity. And I'm 4 years out and still love the Clippers. I still love going to seeing the new stadium, seeing all of my colleagues that were there, as stressful as they have been in the past couple of months. They're accomplishing something that I unfortunately wasn't there throughout the end, but I did love seeing it to come to fruition. So when I tell folks, how do you balance the brand, not safety, but like the brand identity from yours, it's being genuine in telling the truth of how you feel empathetically, not just always telling the truth, even if you're frustrated or you're having issues or anything like that, because none of that gets solved outside of it. And so often I've seen folks, and this isn't Clipper's side, this is a lot more of from my CIO CTO network from across the U.S. when we were having a lot of issues with the salaries for IT, for technology within sports. There is this concept of taking the sports discount. If you're a massive sports fan, you'll do whatever it takes to work. And so you're willing to take a lower rate. And that's great, but it can also lead to resentment and frustration and these things that will bubble up later on. But you got to remember, you can still go find amazing things. You've built a brand alongside this massive $3, $4, $5 billion industry, and using that for good tends to have a lot better outcome than the other way around. And then the last question, or the last answer, is just let PR talk for you. Don't talk to yourself. No, just kidding.
Yeah, I like that. I am curious. You talked about Steve Ballmer, again, the owner of the Clippers. For those that don't know, he used to formulate Microsoft and all that sort of thing. But yeah, Steve Ballmer,
he
Jerry
loves
West.
developers. If you ever want to go to YouTube and look up Steve Ballmer developers, one of my favorite clips to show how passionate he is.
All right. Yes, he is. He is very passionate. Yeah. So him, Jerry West, the NBA legend, Doc Rivers, who was the coach there for a while. Blake Griffin. People, especially if you're a sports fan, you hear names like that, you're probably like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's so cool." What was it like for you to interact with those guys?
I grew up in Longmont, Colorado. I think our biggest star was Carmelo Anthony and Allen Iverson in basketball, at least. And so I was never a massive sports fan, diehard. That was multi-generational. My grandfather passed it down to my dad, passed it down to me. I actually was much more in love with the business of sports and the logistics and how things happen and this weird, unique, concrete market of how things go back and forth and how you can get things done by playing the game and working working from behind the scenes sometimes. With that being said, that really, really helped me when I also have a terrible memory with faces and with names. I remember meeting DeAndre Jordan for the first time, and he's shaking my hand, and I'm 6'4", 250-ish pounds, and I have massive hands, and he completely dwarfed me. And I had to look up to figure out, oh man. But the comment I made earlier about the winning and losing, that is really hard on the business side. It is 10x harder on the basketball side. And having a conversation with most of the docs, shout out to Anne Marie, Doc's chief of staff ever since she was in Celtics. She truly ran that facility amazingly, knew everything and everything. But getting on their good side, always having wins and not taking it personally when something goes bad, because they're never mad at you. They're mad at the situation. They are at the top of their game. They're at these very peak performances, and the computer's not working. Well, F this computer. Like it's the reason. It's not my fault. It's the reason. And for what I usually train my teams are, one, this is just a coworker. This isn't a star. Don't treat them like they are the holiest of ho. And what you will get is a real, genuine person. And if you can empathetically understand why they're frustrated or why something's not working, you quickly get into that being a peer versus being the subservient. Then when it comes to you have enough of a rapport and they're actually asking your opinion or your favor, that's when I said, all right, you've crossed over. And so Doc and I had a really, really decent relationship after the first time that we had draft, and I was in the room helping out just to troubleshoot anything if anything blows up. But there's a couple of those questions that were not technical, and they needed a creative mind, and I'd pipe up, and it would immediately endear me to him because it'd give him a different answer. Or with Steve loves passion. He sees through everything. He sees through every. You want to send him a spreadsheet and try to hide that new budget item you want because you're cutting these other three things that he doesn't want. he will see it almost immediately. I've seen that guy go through spreadsheets upon spreadsheets, and he will find something 10 pages in that we never thought, that we never thought he'd see. So yeah, that's definitely treating people like humans, being empathetic, and not letting any anger or emotions hit you too hard.
I'm just curious, as a side note, being there, being part of the draft, what's that like, the draft night? Is there a lot of tension? I know the NBA is maybe different than like the NFL, whatever. There's only 2 rounds, and typically after the first round, most of those guys, a lot of them don't stick around more than a couple of years. But what's that like, that experience?
Well, you have the 2 rounds, and then you have the stock market period. So the first round is fairly, I would say, it's lined up, but teams will go to their draft day location, wherever it may be. Ours was at practice facility for most of the years, and then there's another location we went when it was in under renovation. But all the scouts come in a few days prior. They are continuously talking through, almost like game planning. Like, if this happens, what about this? If this happens, what about this? And negotiating a lot of the player values, and if they drop, and how the makeup of teams will shift those values, which blew my mind with a lot of the rankings. Is it wasn't 1 through 100, this guy's better than this guy, that is better than this guy. It was, well, if this guy goes to Memphis, now this guy's that much more valuable because of the skill set that this other team lacks, that we can potentially trade it. So there's this really weird ongoing live NASDAQ Dow type of situation. Yeah. And that's where I'd say shout out to the analytics team, Judd Witten, Greg Pime, Matt who has the innate ability of Beautiful Mind, but be like the Beautiful Mind, the movie, but being able to convey quickly to coach, be able to quickly convey to L or any of the scouts of like, what they just asked. All right, here's the 18 different implications that came from that. And a lot of that is prep. They're prepping 6 months ahead. They have an entire analytical model to help them understand. But in the game of, it's going. So first round, it's not as crazy, I would say, for things moving around as much. You might get a lot of the trades. Second round, it's almost anybody's game. And then as soon as that last pick hits, every scout is running out into the hallways because they are now calling for the undrafted agents. It's a mad rush to try to get all those guys locked up as soon as possible. It's brilliant. It's one of the best experiences I've ever had.
That's great. Now you spent 8 years with the Clippers. You then moved to the United Talent Agency, CTO there. I'm curious, what led to the transition? Why leave the Clippers and go to something new?
So I think the biggest transition that got me excited was there's personal reasons that came up. My father had some health issues that I had been working 24/7 forever with the design of the new stadium, with the acquisition of the Forum, with all these different projects. Again, in that very lean team where I wanted to be able to be fully available to him. And then as I shifted some of my mind's values and like what was important, what wasn't, my daughter was growing up, I had a couple conversations with who I call the godfather of IT out here in LA, Mr. Michael Keithley. Michael Keithley was CIO for UTA, and he and I had a number of conversations. We sat on a board together at UCLA Innovate, and he did a great job of making me understand where the future of the technology world is moving. And it's not just IT anymore. It is understanding how those enterprise architectures work, how you can create value, especially in a lot of these older organizations like talent agency. If you think about a talent agency, what's it made up of? About 80% salespeople. They're not called salespeople, they're agents, but that's what they do. Their job is to generate revenue, to service clients, and do it at the highest level that they can. And in old entertainment, that's done with a lot of paper, with a ton of assistance, with all of these different things that, because of how valuable this space is, they didn't need to evolve in the same way. And so he really sold me on coming here and reinventing how the agency world works, and changing those fervent anti-tech people to embrace it. And so like that was what got me really, really excited there.
Yeah. So for those that aren't familiar, what is the United Talent Agency, and what do you guys do?
United Talent Agency is third largest talent agency in the world. They represent some of the top talent across music, TV, film, speakers, podcasting, brands. They have a massive marketing arm and advisory arm. One of the best esports and creator groups in the country, and they're now a global presence. They also have been focused deeper and deeper onto their acquisition world of acquiring some of the high value assets that diversify their portfolio. And they're also they acquired Clutch about 3 years ago, which some of us may know is Mr. LeBron agency, or Mr. LeBron James agent.
Yeah, that's really cool. Now, depending on, I think, too, based on someone's age and experience, like the word technology can be intimidating. Technology is advancing, it's changing, all these sort of things. What's your encouragement, maybe, to those who hear about technology and AI and all the things, and they're afraid, like, if they're not, they got to keep up, or else they're not going to know how to do anything? Like, what's your encouragement to people when they hear about all this technology stuff and maybe their head's spinning?
My focus is empathetic innovation. How do I help folks understand and reduce the fear, the embarrassment, the vulnerability that comes from not necessarily knowing how to use technology? When I was in management consulting, I did a lot of work with your CEOs, your CFOs, your COOs, who they might get enough, but they have an entire team underneath them that actually handles and deals with the systems, whether it's ERP, CRMs, accounting, et cetera. Yeah. And as soon as you go to Gladys from accounting, who has done one thing her entire life, and all of a sudden the entire world is changing and she's frustrated, it's not because she hates tech. In my eyes, it's not because she hates technology. It's because she's been really, really good at what she's done for 30 years or 20 years, and all of a sudden something that can change, or what feels like change, happens in 6 to 12 months, and being told is especially being reinforced by other non-technical people who don't understand what is really going on. Now you get into the echo chamber and news cycle of, oh, everything's ruined, this is terrible. And so my job, or at least my focus of being that tech evangelist, is really breaking down complex tech topics into nice bite-sized pieces. My initial work with your CFOs, your CEOs, and your COOs, I couldn't talk tech. Their eyes would glaze over. I couldn't say, here's all the hyper-converged network infrastructure. They don't care about all of that. It needs to be broken down into business terms. Now, when you're talking to the Gladys back in accounting, it needs to be broken down into terms that she understands, translating it in a way that she feels that aha moment. She doesn't have to know everything. It's less than 10% of any application out there there's less than 10% functionality of every application that's actually used. A lot of technology people love to talk about all the shiny balls and this is going to change everything in your world, but in reality, being able to align something and bring it in the framework that they understand is really, really important. And AI has been that times 10. It's not, hey, the world is going to completely change and you guys better keep up, otherwise you're in trouble. It is, let's get out of the news cycle. Let's actually talk what you mean about agentic AI. When we had the 2 strikes at UTA, my biggest advocacy was around, we should be talking to talent. We should be talking to them and teaching them and showing them what it actually means, versus just watching it on CNN or ESPN or Deadline and Variety, which is the news cycle, which is hard to really digest easily to what does it really mean and how does it affect me.
Now, in your time, all these roles, various companies, you've been part of different acquisitions totaling up to about, I think, $1.5 billion, all the various things you've been part of.
Over 1.5 billion, but yes.
That's a lot. So I'm just kind of curious. People hear that, they hear that number. It sounds astronomical. What is it? What's it like to be part of an acquisition? Kind of what goes into that, and especially from the technological side, like getting new people up to speed, companies, whatever. What's it like to be part of acquisitions?
So it's a great question from both sides of it. I'll talk a little bit about the buy side, which I was primarily on when I was at UTA, when I was with the LA Clippers, where you have a really shiny car that just got a car wash. Everything looks really, really nice. And the owner of your organization comes in and says, hey, I want to buy this car for our new company car. Kick the tires, make sure that it's good to go. But their personality is tied to closing that transaction. In their eyes, it's already done. We just got to dot the I's and cross the T's. You sit into that car, the seats cushions are already worn, the clutch is broken, the steering wheel has a crack on one side. You could still work it, and in the corporate world, that's usually what anybody who's getting acquired, they're trying to clean up as much of their books, as much of their technical stack, as much of their X, Y, and Z. And historically, IT and technology has very rarely been what they realize they need to fix. And so when I've been leading these, it's aligning each one of those specialties to almost what I like to say on a lot of my projects, it's a balance sheet. There's going to be positives and there's going to be negatives. And at the end of the day, if it's the numbers that you want, that's great. If you have 1,000 employees all around the world, you have no data privacy controls, that's a massive negative. Not just because it's not good practice, it's a massive negative because of the fines from the EU, from the issues that you have in the Middle East, from the US, whether it's the CCPA, what's down in Brazil, et cetera. Those have real numbers in them. And the second or third acquisition I got into, I started realizing all of the different insurances that you can have, whether it's errors and omissions or D&O or the cybersecurity insurance. Those are built on standardized, repeatable frameworks that give you a good idea of what's working and what's not. What's working and what's potentially going to make you have to spend a bunch of money as an insurance agency because they had a breach or because they had an error or omission in something that they released. Well, as we take those frameworks back into our regular due diligence, let's just treat it the same way. And nothing's bad. We're not an audit. We're not trying to get you on anything. What we're trying to do is make sure that we both will be successful at the end of this transaction. And the technology piece, a lot of it is, it's very easy to have your blueprints, use the COBIT framework, the ITIL framework, whatever it is, and it's just checking boxes. Do you have security? Is it deployed across all? Do you have an MDM? Do you have policies? Do you have boom, 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 boom? And another tactic that I started to learn with one of my close friends from UTA was give them the playbook of how to fix it. So you can say, here's the issues that we're having. I will be reporting this back to the deal team, but you now have an idea of what it actually is. And the more that you can have some, because I'm not negotiating dollars, I'm giving valuations from the legal side, from the finance side, from the technology side, from all these different pieces, but it's just a guesstimation. And so if you play nicely with those across the table and you don't feel like it's hostile, it's so much easier to get through those transactions much, much quicker, whether they're a $1 million acqui-hire transaction to a $5 billion rebuy of equity. So
yeah, it's good. Now, I'm just kind of curious too how you got into this industry, technology, CTO. Is this something you always wanted to do? And really, like your story leading you all the way to the Clippers. How did you get to where you are?
So it's a little bit of a funny story. To go way, way back, my mother was she was a teacher in Colorado. Got into heavy math. Got pulled into aeronautical engineering. Built out her own aeronautical engineering company. Wow. And did some amazing things. If you're familiar with the Iridium satellites, the OG Starlink of the world that's now owned by the military. she was always surrounded by technology, extraordinarily smart people. My brother was a computer science undergrad and then went into law for IP, which is basically a lawyer who just happens to be enough of a nerd that they know patent law and all the other fun stuff. Me, I took a little bit of a different route. So I went to University of Colorado for business management, business administration, project management, and then a minor in theater. And as soon as I went to my first real theater class, I absolutely fell in love with theater. A terrible actor, but then loved the business of theater. That got me out to NYU and went into NYU for to work on the producer and project management. So half business, half entertainment. Spent way too much money. Came out here to LA. Worked in the entertainment industry for a number of years as your product manager, your production manager. That is just a product manager for a shoot, whether it's a TV shoot, a pilot, a music video. That was the first real foray into getting things camera ready. How do we get the 80%? How do we get enough? We have 1,000 cats all around the stage. Let's get them all together, corralling them, budgeting them, scheduling them. After two really frustrating projects, I was about to get married and decided I can't do this anymore, and moved into IT with no real experience in IT, but I had project management experience. I had these other pieces, and so I was able to convince this consulting company out of El Segundo to take a chance on me. And very quickly I learned all I have to do is be one page ahead. It's like when you're teaching your kids math.
Yeah.
I don't have to remember all of it. I just have to be one page ahead of them before we have to do homework. And quickly became a rock star within there, built out their revenue side, had all those relationships with the C-suites across multiple different industries. So mile wide, inch-ish deep, got poached to come over to LA Clippers. The CFO had a project with us, loved me, and that's where I really started to transition into, okay, I am the most technical person here. I understand how to translate it to business, and dove just curiously deep into that and kept moving up the ranks there.
Yeah, that's great. Now, you describe yourself as a tech evangelist and investor. Mm-hmm. So can you explain what you mean by that?
So the tech evangelist side is some of the things that I've mentioned before regarding keeping people honest to what's actually happening versus what news cycles are. So prophesizing what the future is going to be. And I don't believe it's going to be completely dystopian. I have a lot more faith in humanity of being able to figure some of these things out. At the same time, I truly and wholeheartedly believe that there are bad actors out there, but humans will eventually be able to do much better things as a collective whole. I love how much open source has blown up within the AI sector. I love how much you can really do to not have to go to your typical corporate greed avenues. And so when I'm evangelizing technology, it's what the next version of AI is, what the future of quantum is, what's coming up, and the focus shouldn't be I need to learn a very specific thing and that's all I'm ever going to learn. It should be how to learn to be openly creative, bring in different modalities, different industries to help answer questions that you might be not able to apply a very specific situation in that industry, but here's one in space, or here's one in logistics, here's one in transportation, et cetera. And so that's where my evangelism comes from, of being able to hold conversations up and down the food chain, technical or not, but get people excited and passionate about what the future's looking like.
Yeah. And in the investing side of things, is there any technologies that you're investing in right now or that you're a part of that you're excited about? And,
the ones that I can talk about at this point are very much geared towards deep tech. So we have our own platform that I originally built coming out of United Talent Agency called Evangelism. Its entire focus is if you have an idea, you're an entrepreneur, or you just want to kind of test something out or validate something, you're working with this AI platform to get yourself a business plan, a pitch deck, your funding analysis, or sorry, your market analysis, your financial analysis, costs of your roadmap, and a full feature set, et cetera. All this stuff that usually goes in the deal room. And from that, I've really leaned into the deal flow that I've been seeing within SoCal Deep Tech. Was close with the group who did the SoCal Deep Tech Week a few weeks back, and now I'm on the board for the accelerator that's coming out there. And I think deep tech is so true. Deep for those of you who don't know, deep tech is the combination of AI, robotics, climate tech, dual defense tech, which is a offshoot of the cyber grants to allow anybody who has a really interesting idea that could solve a problem for both military uses, but also be commercialized within the private sector. And then finally is going to be the future health tech. So not like the health tech of today, but what is the future of being able to live till, I don't know, 102 these days? Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Now, I'm just curious. I mean, with your involvement in these things, these projects, any advances that you think maybe are on the fringe right now that you think like 5 years from now will just be common space, mainstream, everybody will be a part of it or using it?
That's a good question. The first, I would probably, I see the trend happening now. It is complicated and convoluted to execute, but those who are having really, really interesting use cases, which is called agentic frameworks. For those of you who don't know agentic frameworks, we all know ChatGPT or chatbots that have an AI backend, but it's one monolithic bot. It's one, you talk to this one assistant, and you have to bake all of the back-end knowledge of what it needs to know into that bot itself. Where agentic is the concept of breaking up your agents into very discrete, very clear, specified instructions that are then orchestrated by one or multiple bots on top. So if you're saying, I want to go on a trip, you have your orchestration and communication bot back with you. But now you have your Travelzoo search bot that is looking for all those. You have your expenses and how much can I actually afford, because it's hooking into your availability. It's looking at dates, what's most important, sending that information back into a final review bot that compiles it, decides what's best for it, puts it into a nice little clean thing, and then pushes it back to the original orchestration bot. Those agentic frameworks are going to be huge because it takes away the complexity that exists a lot within those middle layers of AI. And then the future, absolutely, I think is quantum. I don't think we're getting away from it. I think it's continuing to advance at a pace not faster than AI, because it is so specific and requires very, very specific expertise and background. But the ability for quantum to put the world in how we logically know how computers and software works on its head, what it can solve that are historically impossibly unsolvable concepts, but its relation to the physical world as it can start solving physics questions that we have no idea, or that it takes too much effort to get to solve the different chemistry that for new medicines. Like, that's where I'm really, really excited. And I will be honest, I truly don't know exactly how the mechanisms of it works because of how intricate it is, other than what it can do.
Yeah. So when you say AI, I think everyone's got an idea. When you say quantum, what do you mean by that?
So when I say it, that's a great question, because we love throwing around AI these days. And one of my quips tends to be, we've had AI since the 70s. Like, AI is artificial intelligence, and it's being able to do any sort of process or task on its own, whether with instructions or not. as that's evolved, one of the last AIs that we have scoped down of, oh, that's not really AI, was Google. Google was doing a lot of back end processing to figure out exactly what you want, aligning that to your affinities, and creating your echo chamber, whether that's good or bad. But that was another one of the next big AIs. And then everybody started clumping in ML, machine learning, and AI. Well, machine learning and AI, while similar, are two different sides of that coin, where the data that you can really build these models on, that AI can then use, is extraordinarily valuable together. Separately, they can be very complicated to extricate from one another. And then finally, where we're at today, that we all know is called Gen AI, generative AI. So that is the ability to use the models that have been laid out, and not just give you an answer, but give you an answer in the form and reasoning that you as a human would talk. And the three layers of AI today, where you have your LLM, so foundational framework, where no one's making any money. Don't invest in LLMs today, because they are they were the cornerstone to why we're here, but they're so expensive to operate because of the data required. But that is just the interface to talk like Charles wants to talk, and talk like Dylan wants to talk, rather than, where's my printer? Would you like to have a flower? No, I hate this chatbot. It doesn't work. Versus your 3 level, where you have that. Now you have your middleware, which is hooking, whether it's the multiple agent frameworks, that alongside your oh no, I just forgot what the topic that I just said. The agentic frameworks alongside your anyways, basically the personalization of all of these different services that base LLM can use to give even better of an answer. And then you have your communication. So that's going to be whether it's your chat, or it's your email, or even a dashboard, which is you're seeing a lot more dashboard based AI tooling versus everything being a chatbot, just because it's still really, really hard for the human to connect directly to a keyboard.
Yeah, that's good. Now, I'm curious too, all this technological advancement, even you talk about COVID, a lot of work from home stuff. I know when you were at the Clippers, it made sense to live in LA. You're still in LA. So for those of us that don't live in LA, we hear traffic and a lot of stuff, but what do you like about living there?
So I come from Colorado, and it's a not tiny town, but small enough that you have, going to high school, you had both your friends who had 200-300 acres that they were farming every day, to those who lived in cities I won't name that went and had 10 Prada purses. So it was a very different set of folks out there, but they were Midwest. So everybody was very, very nice. Here in LA, you have more or less the best of the best. It reminds me of New York, kind of reminds me of Miami, but in a different way. But where LA has is this melting pot of, you have your celebrity culture up in Hollywood, where there's a lot of passion, a lot of things going on, very interesting folks up there. You have your sports mecca. We have two soccer. We're up to 4 soccer teams now, 2 football teams, 2 baseball teams. You have the best sports that you could ever have in one location, and then you have the different pockets that are so different from one another. I live down here in the South Bay, which they call the Bubble, El Segundo, Manhattan Beach, Redondo, Hermosa, and I love volleyball. So I can go out and play volleyball every single week that I can't go do in 90% of the rest of the country in that same way. So the weather helps with a lot of the fun stuff of it, and the food is the best diversity within the U.S. In my point, there's really good restaurants in Chicago. There's amazing restaurants in Chicago, amazing restaurants in New York. But being able to have one of the best tacos off of a taco stand that has a C rating, but is the best taco you've ever had, is hard to find anywhere else.
Yeah. So I take with all this, I mean, you're talking about AI and all the different levels. Some people are like excited about it. Some people are nervous about it, think it's going to destroy the world. You know, where you currently stand and all that?
Absolutely going to destroy the world. No, I believe, back to my previous point of, I believe in humanity. I think there is much more good in most people than not in the majority of the population. Money has a way of making that a harder personality trait to hold on to, not because you're a terrible person, but because you start to learn. And human nurture is about learning patterns. If I learn to walk and I fall, well, I get back up, and now I don't want to fall the same way, so I have smaller steps. And it's just that continuous learning and of how the past pattern didn't work, so we go to the next pattern. And I think with AI, it has the ability to be so well democratized as long as we keep pushing, as long as people are willing. It blows my mind how many valuable open source projects are out there that are actively contributed to every single day. And for those of you who don't know what open source projects are, they are almost full-blown applications that are released that you have people from all over the world working together on, rather than a Microsoft who you can't get to its code. You have no idea. You can't replicate the application itself. That's come from the AI revolution. And when I look at the most valuable AI talents, they're not your executives. They're not your presidents. They're not those who typically have the power dynamic that can crush the ability to have any sort of democratized consciousness. They are the kids who are on YouTube teaching you how to do the Lang chain, or some of my best developers came from me just happening upon them. Like, you explained this very, very well. In an hour, you built something that it would normally take a 20-person dev team 2 or 3 weeks to do. So,
yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, Charles, I appreciate the time talking about MBA, technology, a lot of great stuff. As we end here, man, if people want to connect with you, follow you online, anything like that, where can people go?
Find me at hurricanecto.com, linkedin.com/hurricanecto, at hurricanecto on Twitter and Instagram, because that's what we're moving towards, the calm in between the storm.
All right. And yeah, well, since you said it, if someone's like Hurricane CTO, what is the name? What is that? Where's the name come from?
Okay. All right. Love this story. So one of my, once you get me started on stories, I have way too many, but one of my favorite stories, when I was with the LA Clippers, we were in a building that was not... It was very well decorated by the Clipper organization, but it was a 5-story building downtown that didn't have great plumbing, and sure enough, they put a bathroom and a water main above our server room. And so one day at 11 a.m., I think it was like 11 or 12, right before everybody went to lunch, we started seeing water pour out. Open up the server room. It's just like the equivalent of a fire nozzle, but it wasn't a fire nozzle. It straight up was a crack in the pipe that was pouring down water straight onto all of our stuff. And so I was straight into that fight or flight mode. All right, let's get in there, grab me everything I can. The floor was starting to come over. We were grabbing whatever swag, extra t-shirts, stuff that's from last year, to be pulling the stuff out. I'm shutting down the individual servers. We're pulling the servers out and temporarily putting them in another location, and basically on people's desks, to getting them back up, because we had a game that night, and we had Ticketmaster, which is on one of those servers that had to be up. Otherwise, you can't buy tickets and you can't scan tickets. And you can't transfer tickets. And this hurricane's happening, and I'm smiling, because that's what I love. I love to be in the trenches to figure it out and have that the binary troubleshooting of it. Is it this or is it that? It's not that great. Now we go here, narrow it down. Is it this or is that not that great? And then keep going until you're at the exact root cause, and building that with people around you, being able to delegate, let's do this. And the beauty of an organization like the Clippers, there was no one who said no. it's not like this was dirty water, but it's been in the pipes for a bit, so it might be a little like specks in it and things like that. But there wasn't one person who was there putting a train all the way to the bathroom to get to squeegee out these T-shirts and jerseys of an ex-player that I won't name here that were no longer in use. But it was awesome. So like that Hurricane CTO moniker actually was given to me of it's Hurricane Charles, where he comes in, he fixes it, but then he walks out, and it's up to the team to actually clean it back up to where it was.
That's great. Well, Hurricane CTO, we'll link to that in the show notes. People can check that out. Charles, thanks so much for your time.
Dylan, I appreciate it.